Welcome back everybody to 5 lessons from a GB Studio developer. This is for if you want to be a successful Game Boy developer or even a game developer. These are some tips that you should take on if you want to do this for a living. This information is mainly going to be from what I learned from making Take It Racing 2. If you don't already know, I spent 2 years working on this game. And so there is quite a lot of stuff that I didn't know beforehand, because I'd only made very small projects, sometimes only a week long. And this one being 2 years meant that there was a lot that did go wrong and a lot that went right. And hopefully I'll help you figure out how you can take on the good stuff and try and avoid the bad stuff. So number one, I'll say that profit is unlikely, but not impossible. So what that means is you need to have a plan. You need to know how much money you need to make for it to make sense, and how long it's going to take you. At the beginning, it's okay that if you don't want it to make money and you want to learn, for example. At the beginning, I just wanted to make a game. That's all I wanted to do. It was a game called A Western Ballad, and I'm very glad I made it. It took me something like a week or more, but it felt like a lifetime. And you need to be aware that if that's where you're starting, that it's a slow process to get it to be commercially successful, let's say. It doesn't have to be a slow process, but the likelihood is it should be, because you want to be learning along the way, and you don't want to, for example, quit your job and invest tens of thousands of pounds into making a Game Boy game and then it not return what you needed it to return. So hopefully by thinking about this at the very beginning, the likelihood is you're just wanting to make a game, and it'd be nice if you made some money. It's better if you think about it in terms of learning at the beginning, and then once it becomes something that you want to make money from, that you sit down and think about how you're going to make money from it. So number two, I'd say, is don't drown on one idea. So for example, while I was making Take It Racing 2, I did make other games, but for a time I was focusing on this game, and it held me back, mainly because the design wasn't fully conceived. And so I was missing parts that meant that it was almost impossible to finish this game without some new information. So by making other small games while I was making this big game, it meant that I could learn from those things. And I did take some knowledge from those small games in order to bring back into this bigger game. It's very unfortunate that I have seen a few developers that are making a massive game that they're working on for years, and they're also keeping it silent. I do recommend that if you are making a large game, that you share it with the world, make a Discord server or something like that, upload videos of how you're getting on, upload a demo as soon as you can, and get feedback from people, even if it's just people that you know in real life, just to see what they think of the game. So yeah, I would definitely recommend don't dive in and drown in one idea. Definitely keep your options open at the beginning. For example, I made a lot of small 1 week long games for game jams, and now I have a backlog of these little games that I can make a sequel of or remake based on if people did like them or not. And while doing that, I learned about different game genres and what works inside GB Studio. So if you are looking to become a professional Game Boy developer or even just a normal game developer, I would definitely recommend planning your work properly, even if that starts small. For example, you might have an idea that I want to make a game that's a racing game, but I don't know how to make racing in GB Studio or even on the Game Boy. So what you would do is you'd write down what parts of other racing games could work, or what you enjoyed. For example, before I made this game, I was playing a game called Motorsport Manager, and so I thought about what worked and what I liked and what I could take with me onto the Game Boy and into GB Studio, and what my skills were as well. So the next thing I would think about is the outline, which I would put together as a flowchart, because flowcharts work a lot like menus, where you have one screen and it flows into the next screen and the next screen and then comes back to the start, for example, and each arrow, each line can be a process. For example, you gain money or you lose or you win. But you'd still want to outline both generally and also specifically. For example, I was thinking about how the stats would work in the game and how the car would work with the track and also against the other players. So not only do you have to think about there will be a race, you have to think about how the race works. And by outlining it, in your head, it will start to click together like cogs in a machine. You'll start to be able to see the game. And obviously the more games you make, the easier that becomes. The next part is using that to make a prototype. So obviously I made a very small demo that was not scalable, but it taught me about what worked and what didn't and why. For example, even with this version of Take It Racing 2, I can tell that new players are they do not understand what's going on, and it's very difficult to understand and make sense of. So by prototyping and getting people's feedback, you'll definitely be able to improve your game and make it make sense to outside players rather than just yourself, because you know exactly what's going on. Like I said about the cogs, you already have this idea of what the game is, and your imagination fills in the gaps. So by asking people and making this prototype, you'll be able to actually make the game that you want to make for those other people. And then once you've got that prototype and you've got the feedback, you'll want to prototype again. And that's probably where Take It Racing 2 kind of fell a bit short, is because I only prototyped maybe 1 or 2 times when it should have been maybe more like 3 or 4. But obviously, going back to the beginning about it being profitable, the longer I take on something, the less profit there technically is in it if it sells for the same amount at the very end. You always are balancing the act of prototyping with the act of releasing the game. So number 4 of what you'd need to do if you want to be a successful game developer, even in GB Studio, is you want to be setting up goals, deadlines, and contingencies. Just like I said about the prototype, not working, you'll have to think to yourself, what happens if I just cannot fix the problems with the prototype? Am I going to push through and release it anyway, or am I going to go back to the drawing board and waste more time and more money potentially? You need to have your goals and deadlines so that you know what you're aiming for and when it needs to be done, in order to not keep pushing that deadline back. Obviously, the more granular you get, the easier it is to keep control of yourself and know that you're not going overboard. But also, if you don't have much time, it's easier to work with more general deadlines, for example, a week. And that's why game jams are so important. It gets you into that groove of setting the deadline and then releasing the game, the entire game done in a week. But it's all in aiding your learning towards getting to be professional about setting your own goals and deadlines, and also contingencies. Yeah, so if you're not doing that, I definitely recommend it. Since the release of Take It Racing 2, I've cooled off on that, but I'm going to get back into it now and think about what is necessary for me to try to do this for a living. And that's why I'm making this video, really, to document it for myself and hopefully help you guys as well. But at number 5, and talking about reaching out to you guys, I really think that people should be working together more. I'm going to try and work with more people and make small games together, because when we share some of these responsibilities, it makes it a lot easier and also a lot more fun. Obviously, there are always the times that it might be harder and more difficult and more complex, but I do think that the times that you work with someone and it's easy completely outweigh that. For example, on Take It Racing 1, it was actually for a 1-week game jam as well. And there was someone in the community who was a musician and who wanted to make some music. So obviously I said yes, and they made the music for my game. And I absolutely loved the music they made. And it puts the cherry on top of an already good game, of having a great soundtrack. And just think about that with every other part of game development. You can find people and end up making teams together that can really change things for you. Obviously, once you get to the point where you'll be wanting to do this full time, you also want to be thinking about how you can spend less time on the things that are more risky. For example, game development is risky. Like I said, you never know how many people are going to want to play and buy your game. So by having people that can speed it up for you can make it a lot easier, and also test your game for you, right? Having people play your game is like the foundation of games. Is a game a game unless somebody is playing it? Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I hope it made you think about your future as a game developer and what you might need to do to improve or to grow and make your games more professional. Or maybe one of these points was the missing link that you realize that you need to do, and hopefully it will elevate you to the next level. So thank you very much for watching. I'll put my patrons up on screen right now. Thank you so much to you guys. You guys are the absolute best. Remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments. I would love to chat with you down there. you know, what are your goals as a game developer? Have you actually thought about that? And obviously, if you're still at the beginning, what made you start in the first place? Is your goal to just learn about game development and, you know, open the door to this kind of idea of making these digital things for yourself? Or are you pointing yourself towards a future of, you know, profit and business? So yeah, I'd love to hear that down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.